So here we are, experiencing the last Sunday of our wonderful topic, From Vulnerability to Empowerment with the Science of Mind, or New Thought, either one, all of the above. So ultimately, where does our power come from? We've talked about empowerment. Where does that power come from that empowers us through New Thought, through Science of Mind and Unity and all the other New Thought teachings? I heard it. God. And we call God love. Love is another term we use for God. And so the more love that we have, the more empowered that we are. Ernest Holmes wrote in Ideas of Power, he actually wrote a book about power. And in that book, he says, "It is believed that love looses the greatest energy of the universe, the greatest spiritual energy. And without love, there is a certain part of life that does not come to fulfillment. This is real. It is dynamic. It isn't just a sweet sentimentality." I love the way he says that. Consequently, emotionally, psychologically, love is the only final security in the universe. Love is the greatest healing power in the universe and the only thing that binds people together in a community of spirit. And when talking about how to develop friendships, how to go out into the world and interface with people in the Science of Mind text, he said, one of the first things to do is to love everybody. If you have not done this, begin to do so at once. There is always more good than bad in people, and seeing the good tends to bring it forth. Love is the grandest healing and drawing power on earth. So we filled up on love. We fill up on love every time we come into this space. We've moved from that sense of vulnerability that comes out of feeling like a victim in the world. Maybe we've experienced something that's victimized us, or we just have taken that on as we grew up for some reason. So we've moved out of that into feeling empowered. And Science of Mind, New Thought, Unity, whichever teaching you've moved through these teachings with, has been what has empowered us. It's brought us to this place of feeling who we are, the truth of who we are in our own being. So now what? Well, I've been told, and I think you've probably heard this before, that when you learn something, the best way to really get it, once you've started to learn it, is to turn around and teach it to someone else. We've also been taught and we've experienced that as you give, so you receive, that there's that flow of giving and receiving. So as I was thinking about empowerment and how it is that we've reached this place of feeling empowered in Science of Mind, I thought, well, now it's time to really deepen in that by empowering others. By taking the sense of who we are out and seeing how we can empower other people out in the community, out in the world. We can teach them what has empowered us, and we can give away what I call our secrets of how it is we've become empowered. And most importantly, we will behave in ways that are consistent with Science of Mind teachings, New Thought teachings, while we are empowering others. So what has become apparent to me over the last couple months, and I've been feeling this for a couple years, but it became really clear in the last couple months as I've read things on Facebook, on the internet, and also talked to different people here at the center, is that we are all, many of us, feeling that same thing, that it's time to empower others. It's time to take this out there. It's time to walk our talk. We've been holding a vision of a world that works for everyone for many years now. And that's a beautiful vision, and we've started to practice creating that here. And so many of us want to start taking that vision and putting some moving of our feet to the prayer work and to the vision that's been going on around seeing that world that works for everyone. We want to shift from just visioning to actually creating that world. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, I believe we keep on visioning. Visioning is a tool that helps us to go within and figure out which direction we are going. So last Sunday, we held a visioning for specifically that. We were asking Spirit, what is the role of the Center for Spiritual Living in the Heart of Las Cruces when it comes to creating a world that works for everyone? What is our role? What is it we can do to empower others and take this teaching beyond here? Spreading the word. Or as Edwene Gaines says in her book, she says, it is our divine purpose. Once we figure out how to get prosperity in our life, we look for our divine purpose and how we can take then what we have out into the world. So during the visioning last week, there was a question that came up that I think is very important. And that question was, why do people come to the center in the first place? And many people's response was to grow spiritually. They come here because they're seeking a truth, they're seeking a teaching, they're seeking a community of people to be around that encourages that spiritual growth, where they can support each other on that spiritual path, where we can be there in a non-judgmental environment. And we are constantly practicing toward holding that for each other as we walk on that spiritual path. So, once upon a time, there was a little baby boy born into a royal family. And at that time, many, many, many years ago, there were soothsayers around this royal family who told the parents that this little boy was going to grow up to greatness. He was going to do something great. So like many good parents, they wanted to protect this little boy. He was supposed to grow up and be something great. So they built a wall around their compound, and they raised him in the highest and best conditions possible. He was well fed, he was clothed, he was taught. He wasn't allowed to see the ills of the world. They wanted him to be happy. And so he grew up in this condition. He even got married and had a child. Does anyone know whose story this is? Buddha. Yes, so what happened? As he grew up, he became curious. He wanted to know what was outside the walls of that compound. And eventually he snuck out, and what he saw shocked him. He saw suffering. He saw sickness. He saw old age encroach on people in ways he'd never seen it before. He saw man's inhumanity to man. This was Siddhartha's life. He grew up living at the foothills of the Himalayas in India. So what did he do after seeing what was going on beyond the walls of that compound? He decided to leave his home and family, and he wandered through the world, through India, for 6 years as a pauper, begging and experiencing poverty. Now, I read this story in one little book to just refresh my memory about his story, and they said after 6 years, he didn't experience any spiritual return. I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. The way I interpreted that is that he didn't feel enlightened even after experiencing 6 years in poverty, wandering through the environment and in the world as one of them on the other side of the wall. In other words, he didn't get any spiritual relief from this experience. What he ended up realizing is that enlightenment must come from looking within. So he decided he was going to sit under that famous Bodhi tree. He was going to sit there until he attained spiritual ecstasy, is how they termed it, or enlightenment. He spent 3 days there, and then he got up and resumed his journey as what we know today as the Buddha. He spent 40 years then traveling and teaching, and what he taught was ceasing to do evil, learning to do good, and that we need to purify our hearts. So that's the story, very briefly, of the birth of Buddhism. So why am I telling you this story? Well, when I thought about that compound that he was raised in, I thought about how we can create walls that are physical to feel like we are safe, but we can also create walls on a spiritual and emotional and basically spiritual and emotional level. I said the physical part. So we're looking at how it is we create those walls to keep ourselves feeling safe. And one of the things I think that we have done as part of the New Thought movement, and within even these walls here, is we've created safe places for us to grow spiritually. We've created places where we can empower each other. I've heard many people say, and I too have said, I don't watch TV anymore. I don't want to see what's going on out there. I'm keeping my spiritual self feeling good and feeling centered. We have people that say, I don't get involved in politics anymore. I don't get involved in what's going on in the world. But what came to me is that in some way we've created a spiritual wall around us that makes us feel safe. And what I know is that some of us, what I've been hearing, are starting to peek beyond the wall. We're starting to move out beyond the wall. And what we see is alarming. What we've seen is shocking in some ways. It's different than what feels good here in this space. So I thought I would share with you some words that I was actually surprised to see as we went through the Essential Ernest Holmes again. I hadn't noted it as clearly before as I did as we're reading this in our class right now. And this is what Ernest Holmes wrote in 1931. He wrote an article where he's explaining what this teaching is really about. He said, the practice of religious science is quite different from the popular concept of it. There are those unfamiliar with this practice who often misunderstand and misinterpret its meaning. It is a popular belief that those who practice this science are a class of people who declare that everything is perfect when, in a matter of fact, everything in the objective experience of the race, and when he says the race, he means the human race, everything in that objective experience of the human race is not perfect, and indeed is far from being perfect. This popular idea of the practice of spiritual science is entirely a misconception. A religious scientist is not one who assures himself that wrong is right, that evil is good, that limitation is freedom, that bondage is liberty, or that sickness is health. He does not claim that our objective experience is an illusion, but he does make this claim, that behind the phenomena of human and material existence, behind the slow and persistent process of evolution, there is, as Emerson stated, one mind common to all people. He claims that this mind is perfect and that we all have access to this mind. And further on, he says that as we practice this, as we realize our connection with the one mind, that there is tolerance in this concept and inclusion. The infinite is all-inclusive, all-embracing, and all-comprehending, and that we are to work in harmony with all other religions, all other spiritual paths, and all people. And so for me, that was interesting, and it made me think a little bit more about what it is that we've been doing over the years. And I think for some of us, learning about New Thought, learning about science of mind has been like the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. We've done the introspection. We've sought that enlightenment. And we've been sitting there for a while. And so now we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are one with the one. We recognize that. We've looked within. We do it consciously. We have a good understanding of spiritual truths and spiritual principles and how they work in our lives. We've experienced our version of spiritual ecstasy. And we know that no matter what we're looking at, everything is in divine order. And we know that everything is in divine right action. So what that's telling me is the fact that some people are starting to peek over the wall and are starting to move beyond these safe walls, that too is in divine order, that too is part of divine right action. And so now what Edwene Gaines taught about finding our divine purpose makes a little more sense to me. It also is something that I've started to see as not only a personal thing, not only do each one of us seek our divine purpose in the world and what that looks like, but as a collective community, we are seeking our larger divine purpose in this community and what that might look like. The book of Edwene Gaines that I'm referring to is The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. And like I said, the last chapter, she talks about finding our divine purpose. And in here she defines that. She says, finding and following your divine purpose is different from setting your goals. A goal is a tangible desire with an end result. But your divine purpose is really a way of living. She said, once we find our divine purpose, it's something that you will be working with and growing with for the rest of your life. And she says the way to find it is that, first of all, you realize your potential in this lifetime. So we've been working on that. We've started to realize who we really are. And the first thing then you do is you look out upon your world. And she does say, understand that every single one of us is going to look out through our own eyes and through our own consciousness. So we're going to see different worlds. We're going to see different areas that we might be drawn to. She says, we will notice all the things that need to be healed or fixed or transformed. Then she said, after looking carefully at the world, we must pick one thing that we feel needs transforming, something that would be fun for us to get involved in repairing, shifting, restructuring, fixing, and perfecting. She says, note, I use the word fun. I started this month by talking about the importance of having fun, the energy that fun brings into any situation. And so she continues to say, this is not about martyrdom or great personal sacrifice. This is about focus, joy, and a sense of purposeful, possible achievement. And what I thought was interesting is she says that as we find our divine purpose, what we're doing is we are convincing ourselves of our own divinity. We are showing ourselves how it is that we have the power to affect change, that we are bigger, stronger, more powerful, and more creative than we've ever thought possible. And that's why we go out in the world and seek where we can bring our light and be what it is that we want to see. We bring about that change by being out there with the people. She has a whole list of questions that you can ask yourself as you're seeking to discover your divine purpose. And I think those will be good questions for us to continue asking ourselves as a community. I'm not going to go through them right now. One of the other things she says, which I thought was really important, is it's good to be a seeker. It is good to be a seeker, and that's what many of us have said is the reason we came here, is we were seeking something. She said, but sooner or later you must be a finder and share what you have found with your world. We have far too many professional seekers on this planet, in my opinion, and we need more finders. So I liked that as well. So, as we continue thinking about this, and I've been talking about it and interacting with different people on this topic, one of the people I talked to was Cheryl Clark, a practitioner that served here who's moved away. And we've been having some FaceTime conversations, which is really nice because it's like she's right there in the room. And she reminded me of a book that I started reading. I think I shared a few things with you out of it, and then I put the book down because something else came along. So I looked back at it again this week. and it is called Falling Upward, A Spirituality for the Two Halves of Life. And it's by Richard Rohr. And his premise in this book is that as we go through life, we basically have two halves to our spiritual growth process. And we spend a lot of time in the first half, which is focused on the value of law, tradition, custom, authority, and boundaries. And he said this is important because when we focus on those things, it creates in us predictability, impulse control, and gives our ego some structure. So he talks about the importance of going through that first stage of spiritual growth. And then he says, if you are on course at all, your world will grow larger. It will expand. The first half of our spiritual life and growth is all about what he says, the no. It's defined by the no, what we shouldn't do, what we can't do, what those boundaries are, what we're saying no to. The second half is about the yes. It's what we're saying yes to. He said, in that second half of spiritual growth, we no longer need to divide the field of our experience in every moment between up and down, totally right and totally wrong, with me or against me. It just is. It just is. And he says, in the calm of this, it allows you to confront whatever must be confronted with an even greater clarity and incentiveness. He said the stance is not about passivity, which is what sometimes I think we are afraid of, is all of a sudden we're just being real passive. He said, in fact, this is the essential link between true contemplation, which is what we've spent a lot of time doing, and skillful action. The big difference is that your small and petty self is out of the way. And if God wants to use you, which God always does, God's chances are far better now. And he talks about that in the second stage, the second half of our spiritual growth, that we see the big picture, a bigger picture. And we see a God that creates all and loves all. Then he says both the Dodgers and the Yankees, blacks and whites, Palestinians, Jews, Americans, Afghanis, and that basically as we start to see that God created everyone and everything, he said whole people, we become more whole. Whole people create wholeness wherever they go. And I do believe that's part of what it is we're seeking to do. So thinking back then to the visioning that we did last Sunday, one of the things that has come up as we visioned, and we try and vision here every month, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a minute, but what has come up over the years that I've been doing visioning with this community is that we want to see more youth, more younger people joining who we are, understanding this teaching and having this teaching available to them. And then as I thought about that, I thought about what I had learned in the iGen book, and I brought it. I shared this with you, I think, last summer. This is a great book if you want to understand. It's a research project that's looked at youth, teenagers moving out into the world as young adults from 1976 through, I don't know how far she got here, I think 2017, somewhere in there before this was published. It's very interesting. It compares what the different generations have been interested in, what their focus is. And one of the things that I found interesting as I thought about this falling upward and this idea of moving into the second stage of spirituality is that a lot of what she said the younger generation wants is in that second stage of spirituality. It's like they got there before we did. They got there with a lot less of the introspection that we required to get there. Some of the things that she said is that fewer and fewer are going to church. And recently I saw an article that said, Dear Church, and explained all the reasons why people are not going to church. And again, It fits with what the iGen book was talking about and this idea of falling upward, what we are looking for in the second stage of our spiritual growth. So for those that she researched and studied who are staying within spirituality, this is what she said, they will be ushering in a new, more tolerant era of Christianity that steps away from what people should not do and focus on, and what instead focuses on what they should do. And that's what that falling upward was saying. We're moving out of the what we don't do into the yes, what we do do. Ernest Holmes said, stand for something, what we can do, what we do want, and against nothing. That's the no. He was already there in that second stage. That's not a surprise to me. She also said that the newer, younger generations want religion to be more positive and less negative. They want us to focus on what we can do in terms of actually getting out and doing something, not just what we're telling them they can't do. And they want a religion or a spirituality that accepts everyone. So there they are, already in this space that we have spent many years trying to get to. The other thing that it said in the iGen book that they want is they want to interact with people. They don't want to sit there like you all are doing and listen to me. They want to get out and interact with people. So what I realized is that what we teach is something that could really feed a younger generation of people. It's part of what they're seeking, but I also understood they are not going to miraculously walk through these doors unless we invite them to come sing for us. They're not seeking for us, or this gentleman just happened to walk through the doors a couple weeks ago. Most of the youth are out there doing things already. And so if we want to interact and share with them how we've been empowered and what this philosophy is about, we have to go join them. We have to get out there and find where they are and how they're being of service, because this is what speaks to the younger generation. They want to be out there and be of service. Now, they also said in the iGen book that this generation doesn't believe that change is going to happen from government or politics, that it's going to happen through individuals. And so I know that for many of us who don't want to get involved on all of the political stuff, that's a good news too. We go out there and get involved with the youth and see how we can be of service to the world. So, as we take our empowered selves, and dare I say our enlightened selves, out beyond these walls, we can share with the world what has empowered us, what has brought about a sense of wholeness in our lives. So take a moment to just consider, how has Science of Mind, New Thought, Unity, any of these teachings, how have they empowered you? How have they empowered you to heal? How have they empowered you to find sobriety? How have they empowered you to find your voice? How has Science of Mind empowered you to make better choices in your life, whether it has to do with ways to bring about greater prosperity, whether it's related to relationships, food, what we're eating? Many of us have shifted how we've eating over the years here. Whether we've learned how to make better boundaries for ourselves, healthier ways of setting boundaries in our lives. How has Science of Mind helped us to grow spiritually? Helped us to feel freer, happier, or healthier? One of the things I know for myself is I felt called to be a minister back when I was told that women are not ministers. And so finding Science of Mind not only allowed me to move into my calling, but it also allowed me to move into my calling, and the fact that I was born gay didn't matter either. And that was huge, because I'd spent many years grappling with that, trying to define that, trying to figure out how to justify myself as a minister, a spiritual leader. So I've been able to free myself to do what was mine to do and to follow that calling that's mine. So I think with Science of Mind, we've come full circle now. We started out in situations where we might have felt vulnerable, we might have felt victimized in some ways in our life. Science of Mind has empowered us. It's taught us who we really are. It's given us a voice. It's allowed us to feel the power of Spirit moving in and through our lives. Now we're thinking about taking it out there, and we're back to feeling a little vulnerable. At least I am. It's really safe here. It still isn't safe sometimes for me out there, if you think about what's happening. But I'm calling it empowered vulnerability. I'm seeing it as the kind of vulnerability that Reverend Randy Granger was talking about last week. The kind of vulnerability where our hearts and our minds are open more, where we're expanding our world, where we're walking our truth out in the world, not necessarily of the world, as they say, but out in the world. So for those of us who are ready to take this empowered, enlightened journey and to empower others out there to be of service in the world, the ad that showed up in this month's Science of Mind magazine for an organization called SOME couldn't have come at a better time. This is it on page 62. And SOME is Spiritually Guided Social Uplift Ministry. And it's a group that comes through AGENT, which is the, let me get the exact words, Association of New Thought, Global New Thought. There we go, AGENT, Association of Global New Thought. And this coming together is a group of people from Unity, the Centers for Spiritual Living, Agape, and other New Thought organizations to create this social uplift ministry. And what they're looking for is a practical, productive, and meaningful way to engage on difficult and challenging topics. And they've come up with many topics, lots of things that we can read, discussion things that we can do. So we're looking at how it is we could interface with them and bring some of their awareness into our community. Again, from the visioning last week, it became clear that the term social justice can trigger some negativity in some people. So we wanted to look more at what does that mean? What does social uplift ministry mean? How do they dovetail? How do they not? How do we dialogue around this? So we're going to be having more discussions in this arena. The first discussion to continue on this topic will be Tuesday night, July 16th at 5:30. If it's not already in your bulletin, it will be next week. We'll be coming together to just continue the discussion. What does it look like? What does social justice look like through the lens of Science of Mind and the principles that we teach? It also became clear that some people still don't understand how visioning works, how this tool that we use in a lot of our centers, how visioning can serve us in our lives. So we're going to be doing a visioning workshop in July on the third Sunday when we normally do visioning as a center. We're going to make it a workshop. So if you have never experienced it, if you don't know how to use this tool in your life, come to the visioning July 21st after the service, and we'll be learning about how visioning works and how we use it as a community to help guide us. We're seeking greater ways to bring our principles beyond these walls out into the world while staying in principle. Science of Mind principles have empowered us to stand for something and against nothing. They've empowered us to treat each other lovingly, gently, and with respect. We practice that here, and we can model that in the rest of the world. We can take that premise out as we interface with other people. It has empowered us to lead through prayer and visioning. And we can continue to do that. We listen to that spirit within. We go within to that place like under the Bodhi tree where we're looking for enlightenment within. And then it has taught us and empowered us to respect all people, no matter where they are on that spiritual path, whether they're still in the first half of their spiritual growth or they've moved into the second stage and are starting to fall upward. Wherever they are, we support people on their spiritual path. It has empowered us to create safe and loving boundaries, and we will continue to do that for seekers. For people who come here who want a safe place to experiment with change and spiritual growth and learning about how these principles work. Places for people to come here to do that introspective work. It has empowered us how to be an example of how it is we can be an inclusive community. And as I shared earlier, we can go out there and tell the world that this community did not turn into a pillar of salt by allowing gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgendered people to walk through our doors, much less be in leadership positions. We did not turn into pillars of salt. God's wrath has not been sent down upon us. Instead, we are living in a thriving, healthy, happy, loving environment. And we can share that as we go out there, that this isn't a dangerous thing to open our hearts and minds to people who are different than us. We can set examples out in the larger community. And we can continue to do our own inner work as we seek to learn more about people that we don't know anything about. So stay tuned for more opportunities as we're going to be bringing some of these discussions and thoughts and ideas here to the center. We're going to learn what we can from the Social Uplift Ministry, and access their materials. We're going to continue to vision and see where Spirit wants to lead this Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces. So to sum it up, CSL is exploring which is the Social Uplift Ministry. We are falling upward into a second stage of spiritual growth and evolution. We are opening to a new level of vulnerability, what I call empowered vulnerability. We're opening our hearts. We're opening our minds. And I know that just as Science of Mind has empowered us this far, it will continue to empower us as we move forward into these new adventures. Science of Mind is going to empower us as we take the sum of our love, the sum of our principles, and the sum of our light out into the world so that we can be a part of creating that world that works for everyone. So let's sum up life and continue to fall forward, and so it is.